Welcome to the Liberty Hour. I am Alex Newman, your host here on Patriot TV. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, you know that the Biden administration has been relentlessly imprisoning dissidents and political opponents, up to and including trying to get the president, former president of the United States, and probably future president of the United States thrown in jail, along with many of his key advisors, his key campaign staffers. It is absolutely incredible. We've never seen anything like this in American history, but it looks like things are on the verge of changing, and plans are already being made for the second Trump administration and the new MAGA deal. Joining us to discuss is Peter Navarro, Trump's economic advisor, longtime policy advisor on trade and other issues. He's only one of three senior White House officials who was with the president from 2016 campaign all the way to the end of the first term. He was the director of the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, and he served as policy coordinator for the Defense Production Act. Absolutely critical player in the Trump tariffs and trade policies, the tough on China policies, and of course, victim of persecution by the Biden administration. Peter, welcome to the program. Thank you so much. Before we get into the second Trump term, I've got to ask you, you're just recently released from a federal penitentiary. You are one of several key Trump insiders who've been imprisoned by the regime. What was that like? How did they treat you in jail? And would you do it again?
Before we go there, I want to get this off on the right foot. I don't want there to be any misconceptions about this book, The New MAGA Deal. This is not the plans for the second term. This is the weapon we use to win the election in November. The New MAGA Deal, it's at newmagadeal.com or on Amazon. And I wrote this book right after the 2022 congressional races, which were disappointing to say the least, where that red tide wave that was supposed to come didn't materialize. And what's important here, I like to always stay in the future and see where we got to go. What's really important to me now is to understand that we have a fight on our hands. It's going to be a close election. It was always going to be a close election. And I am advocating very strongly that we fight and win this election on policy grounds. If you look at the polling as to what voters care about when they're going to go to the ballot box, we win on everything. We win on the top thing, which is inflation in the economy. Trump wins on border security. Trump wins on foreign policy, all double digits. Trump wins on law and order. Trump wins on the weaponization of the justice system. Trump wins on all of the woke policies. And what the New MAGA Deal book does, Alex, in 37 chapters with the help of former Trump officials, is to point out the 100 actions in 100 days that are going to address those 6 major problems I just described to you. The other side, all they got is orange man bad and abortion, abortion, abortion. And we can't get sucked into that. We can argue, in fact, that their position on abortion is extreme. They want abortions right up to the time of birth. But we don't want to spend our time on that. We want to spend our time on what the voters care most about: the economy and inflation, border security, foreign policy, weaponization of our justice system, law and order, and all this woke stuff. So the New MAGA Deal is focused on that. I did get out of prison a little less than 2 weeks ago. At the Republican National Convention, I said, I went to prison, so you won't have to, meaning that if you simply look at my story of how Democrats across all 3 branches of the federal government were necessary to put me in prison, all 3 branches, the Congress controlled by Democrats, the Attorney General, a Democrat, an Obama-appointed judge, a D.C. jury of Democrats. All Democrats put me in prison for defending the Constitution. If they can do that to me, they can do that to you or anybody in this country. As for the prison experience, look, no country for old men. Barbed wire, lockdowns, bad food, no medical treatment to speak of, and at times some dangerous situations. But look, I would do it all again, exactly the same way, because what's at stake here are higher constitutional principles. We cannot let Democrat elites that now control that party use our government to control us. What I said at the Republican National Convention, I don't know if you saw the speech, if we don't control our government, their government will control us. So this is my weapon between now and Election Day. New MAGA Deal at newmagadeal.com. You can get it on Amazon. But what I'm asking you to do is get this book, understand what the policies are, and then go out and proselytize in a secular way the gospel of Trump with respect to these policy issues. And let's not go down the rabbit hole of the personal attacks on Kamala Harris. She's an objectionable, unlikable person, fine, whatever. Okay, but we don't need to go there. There's all these policy issues she's just wrong on. She's against fracking, so that there goes the strategic energy dominance we could have. She's against defunding. She was the queen of defunding the police. That speaks to law and order issues. She's full-throated endorsement on Bidenomics. She was supposed to be the border czar. She said, not my job, and refused to do it. We got 8 million illegals coming into our event. And nobody believes that Kamala Harris is prepared for foreign policy. She has zero experience. And the Chinese, the Russians, the North Koreans, the Iranians, and whoever's left of the bad guys will eat her for lunch.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about trade, Peter. I know that's your wheelhouse. I know you were instrumental in Trump's trade policies last time around. Let's talk about tariffs first, because tariffs have been on everybody's lips lately. Donald Trump has been talking about them publicly. And of course, the free traders are out with the knives out, saying that this is going to harm us. It's going to hurt consumers. It's going to act as a tax increase on the poor and the middle class. Why do you think we need tariffs as one of the weapons in our arsenal to rebuild manufacturing and rebuild our economy here?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to point out that of all the policies that Joe Biden undid with respect to the first Trump administration, one of the major things he left totally in place was the tariffs on communist China, which speaks to their effectiveness. During the first Trump administration, I talked about China's economic aggression. It's so-called 7 deadly sins. It's not just that they have cheap labor. They commit all these trade violations, currency manipulation, the counterfeiting and piracy, massive government subsidies, the state-owned enterprises. And if you're going to defend yourself as a country against that, tariffs are really the most elegant and simple weapon. The big critique, which was false in the first term, turned out to be false, was that somehow tariffs would create inflation. It did not. Didn't have any impact at all on the price level. All it did was bring in a lot of revenues and create a lot of jobs domestically. We are in a world where communist China, along with other major countries like India, like the whole of Europe, including Germany, have substantially higher tariffs than we do. So the president's proposed Reciprocal Trade Act would simply say, look, if you, Germany, do not want to lower your tariffs to us so we can actually start selling things like automobiles to Europe, then we will raise our tariffs to yours. So tariffs are common sense. They're a good way to level the playing field for American workers, and they can bring in a lot of revenue. So tariffs, I think the American people understand that. They're good.
Yeah, I happen to agree with you. And it's interesting, you have a PhD in economics from Harvard University. A lot of the elitists in economics would say, no, we just need to go to these free trade deals, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, things like that. I want to talk to you briefly about that. One of Donald Trump's signature policy initiatives early on when he was campaigning, even in 2016, was we got to stop with these multilateral trade deals that undermine our sovereignty, and we've got to move back toward bilateral agreements, country to country, government to government.
Yeah.
What's your view on these huge trade agreements, these multilateral trade agreements, and of course the World Trade Organization? And do they undermine American sovereignty, our ability to control our own systems, our own borders, et cetera?
I know you wanted to talk about this terrible Project 2025. This might be a really good place to do that because it illustrates the problem with these trade agreements and things like that. Way back when that thing was first started, they came to me and they lied to me. They said, Navarro, we want you to write the chapter on trade for the Project 2025 book. I said, well, okay. All right, I'll give that a shot. So I write this chapter, which highlights things like why multilateral agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership are bad. That particular, the TPP, was basically designed as a geopolitical weapon against communist China, and the quid pro quo for America was to surrender our auto parts and auto industry to Japan and Vietnam. I mean, it was like an insane, stupid agreement. It did not benefit us. So when you get into these multilateral agreements, you have to give away far too much to get whatever it is they might throw as crumbs on your table. So the Project 2025 thing, they go through the process, whatever, and we get to the end, and they're getting ready to publish the thing. I get the call from the guy, I think it's Paul Gans, and he goes, there's another chapter on trade in the Project 2025 book. I said, what do you mean? It's like you asked for what the Trump policy is going to be. He's the presumptive nominee. What are you representing here? Well, I said, what's the chapter? And he says, it's the case. You can't make this stuff up. The case for free trade. I go, oh. And it's like the Heritage Foundation. The problem with the Heritage Foundation, conservative think tank in these like quotes here, is they get most of their funding, always have, always will, from the corporate elites, the multinational corporations that love to offshore our jobs, open up our border, and bring in the cheap labor. So that Project 2025 is dead on arrival because it's a Trojan horse funded by globalists that uses like some legitimate Trump policies as kind of like the veneer, and then throws in a bunch of weird stuff that doesn't reflect Trump policy at all. I was on a podcast with a religious leader, and apparently there's some scripture about how in order to tell the counterfeits, you have to have the truth. So new MAGA deal, these are Trump policies. They're policies to win the election in November. Project 2025 has been discredited by President Trump, and I disavowed it the minute they started pulling their stupid shenanigans from it. That Heritage Foundation and this other thing called the America First Policy Institute, they do the same thing. They get some Trump people in there willing to make a buck off them, and then they put a bunch of other people in who are the rhino globalists, and they think that somehow they're going to pull one over on the president. Not going to happen.
Glad to hear it. Folks, we're going to go to break real quick. We're going to come right back after this break with more from Peter Navarro. We're going to break down communist China, the threat it poses to the United States, how we deal with it, and so much more. Stay tuned.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most precious assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott Precious Metals at 720-605-3900. That's 720-605-3900.
On Monday at 6 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Pacific, Election Edge. We're going to talk politics, polling. We're going to give you great inside commentary behind the statistics. Who's up, who's down? Donald Trump, Vice President Harris, Cornel West, Jill Stein, Robert Kennedy, three-way race, two-way race. We'll break it all down for you. Election Edge starting Monday.
I don't know about you, but I have to have that cup of coffee in the morning. And Kingdom Cup is mold-free, it is pesticide-free, and it is organic. It's got this flavor that is delicious. You don't even have to put cream or sweetener in it.
Why did we go with the bean form, the whole bean? Because ultimately the powder form is the one that gathers most moisture. And that means the more potential mold development. This is actually organic, mold-free, certified. That's important because ultimately people drink coffee. It's cultural. And so we tried to meet the culture where it is and create a healthy alternative.
Make the healthy choice for you and your family. Try mold-free, pesticide-free, and it's organic. Delicious Kingdom Cup coffee. And it's available now at the Patriot TV store. Go to patriot.tv and click on store. You'll find Kingdom Cup coffee in the health and wellness section. Order Kingdom Cup coffee at the Patriot TV store now.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
Welcome back to the Liberty Report here with your host, Alex Newman. And we have the great Peter Navarro with us breaking down the economic policies that Trump is going to win on. Peter, thank you for staying with us over the break. I want to talk a little bit about communist China before we get to inflation. You are, of course, a China scholar. You've been studying this for a long time. I think we all share your concerns about what's going on with Beijing. How do you propose, I know you addressed this in the new MAGA deal, but how should Donald Trump, how should America, how should the United States government be addressing what I would argue is a threat from communist China, not just economic, but much broader?
Well, that's a question we could do a whole day's show on because the threat is so diverse coming at us from so many flanks. But in the first Trump administration, the central way of dealing with China's economic aggression was through the tariff policies. And then as we went further into the term, we began to adopt investment restrictions on China as well. And in many ways, you could argue that it's just as important or more important to restrict the flows of communist Chinese capital, both into the U.S. and both from U.S. pension funds and investment funds to China. I mean, the reality is that consumers in America finance China's military buildup. Our trade deficit with China is roughly equivalent to their military budget. Just think about that every time you buy something from China. And then our pension funds are investing in Chinese markets where the capital is then used to build their military. So this is, I mean, we shouldn't be doing that. So I think I think you start there and just making people more aware of the threat that exists itself. I mean, they're coming at us in all directions. There's a couple of good chapters in the new MAGA Deal book, newmagadeal.com. It's on Amazon, where we deal with these kind of national security threats from both from a historical perspective and in kind of actions we're going forward. We're being distracted yet again by yet another crisis in America. This one, the border crisis from China. But I can assure you, Donald Trump is going to act firmly in many different ways dealing with communist China.
Peter, how did we get into this mess with communist China? I mean, I know their dictators are pretty clever, but it seems to me like American elites in business, in government, have played a major role in creating the situation that exists today. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, if you look at Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, Biden prided himself on being someone who had met with the dictator Xi Jinping more than any other world leader. He boasts of the 100 hours that he's. I mean, but what happens is it's like the grand seduction. China, going back to the days of Nixon, Alexander Haig, and others, through many different White Houses, seemed to get seduced by the diplomacy of China when communist China's entire goal is to get us to talk and not take action. Trump took action. Biden, Harris have let China have their way with us. The only thing they've really done to stop China is to keep the Trump tariffs. So there's some irony there. I think that we just need to keep highlighting the problems. But it's kind of frustrating to me. I mean, I've written 3 books and done a movie on this thing dating back to 2006. It's not like we don't know what they're doing. It's just the politicians don't seem to want to act on it, often because somehow they're benefiting from communist China through some kind of economic advantage to them while the country's being hurt.
Yeah, one of your books, The Coming China Wars, stupendous expose of this very problem. We're down to just a few minutes left, Peter, and I've got to ask you about inflation. It's one of the things that's on everybody's mind, rich, poor, middle class. We're all suffering from it. How does that get dealt with?
Well, first of all, again, winning this election means that the Trump policy's got to be how we attack Kamala Harris. She's supported full-throated Bidenomics. She was the tiebreaker on the 2 big budget-busting bills in Congress that are driving inflation now through overspending. So she owns that. And the way we unwind it, and again, newmagadeal.com, the book, New MAGA Deal shows you how we have to bring home our supply chains. When you have fragile and resilient supply chains breaking down globally, that creates cost push inflation. When you spend too much money, because Kamala Harris is breaking ties on votes for major budget busting bills. So we have to bring spending back under control, bring our supply chains home. And we can wrap this right around Kamala Harris's neck. I mean, she owns that. She cannot back away from inflation. She cannot back away from immigration because she was supposed to be the border czar. And we just need to keep hammering her with that.
Yep. And so, Peter, in the last couple of minutes, a lot of our viewers are just everyday average Americans. They go home, they talk to their family, and they got some Biden supporters. What are just 3 talking points that an average person can use with their friends, with their family, with their coworkers on why Trump would do a better job?
In Trump's America, you didn't have to choose between food on the table, medicine in the cabinet, or a roof over your head. That ain't bad when you're trying to explain what inflation means to the middle class. In Trump's America, you were safe and the border was secure. In Trump's America, communist China, imperial Russia, the Rocket Man in North Korea, and the mullahs of Iran left us and the rest of the world alone. Why? Because they feared and respected Donald Trump. They don't fear Kamala Harris. They're going to eat her for lunch. So those are the kinds of things I think when you're talking about what a new Trump administration looks like, just ask them to remember what the old one was like. Pretty good, safe, secure, and prosperous. New MAGA Deal, newmagadeal.com. You can get it on Amazon, and I really appreciate your time today.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on the program, Peter. We appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in North Carolina at the Reawaken America. Thank you very much for all that you do. Yes, sir. Yeah, you and I will both be speaking. Looking forward to it. Thank you, Peter. God bless you. All righty, folks. That was Peter Navarro, author of the great book. You've got to get a copy prior to the election, The New MAGA Deal, the unofficial deplorables guide to Donald Trump's 2024 policy platform. These are things that we've got to keep hammering. Yeah, as Peter said, Kamala is a rather unlikable person, but the policy is really critical in this election. We've got to articulate, and the American people have to understand that policy is absolutely critical. It's not a personality contest per se. This is about what's going to be good for the United States. And unfortunately, we've got generations now of bad policy that, in my view, has actually been suicidal to the United States, whether that be when it comes to communist China or globalism, the United Nations, the open borders. These are all policies that are destroying the country. And so it's critical that we have a good understanding of this. And I do encourage you to get a copy of that book, The New MAGA Deal, the unofficial deplorables guide to Donald Trump's 2024 policy platform. You can get it on Amazon or anywhere that good books are sold. We're just about out of time. But before we go, Patriots, I want to share with you why I joined Patriot TV. Alongside other great Americans like General Michael Flynn. Like you, I was tired of the misinformation, the evil coming out of the fake media. It's elitists waging war on our country, on our families, on our values, on our Constitution, and they use lies and deception and trickery to do that. And frankly, I'm fed up with it. And I know you are too, or you wouldn't be watching here. So I want to encourage you to subscribe to Patriot TV. Go to patriot.tv, sign up, and it's your subscriptions that help us continue producing content like this, that help us to bring people like Peter Navarro to you. Great voices in the America First movement, policy voices that understand, people in the culture, people in education, people that are fighting the good fight. And that takes resources. And so when you sign up, when you subscribe, you become a Patriot Defender member. You're also going to get exclusive content and exclusive discounts for incredible goods and services that you're going to find only in the Patriot TV store. So go to patriot.tv/Liberty Report. That's patriot.tv/Liberty Report. Help support us, sign up today, and make a difference in the fight for our country and our freedom and our values. I'm Alex Newman. This is the Liberty Report. Until next time, thanks for watching, and God bless you all.